All right, quite a story here. A Huntington Beach man has been found dead in Death Valley National Park after apparently running out of gas, getting out to walk in the scorching heat. I know. Park visitors found the body of David Keller.
In July '96, a family of 4 from Germany drove into Death Valley, hoping to save a few hours on the road. Their rental vehicle was found 3 months later. It took 13 years to find their remains, but they were not the only ones. Between 2007 and 2024, the United States National Park Service recorded 68 deaths in Death Valley. Nearly every fatality linked to extreme heat occurred in July. And every year, despite the warning signs, despite rangers repeating the same message again and again, between 1 and 3 people still fail to return. What is striking is that none of these victims did anything obviously foolish. None of them believed they were risking their lives. All they did was respond to a broken vehicle in the middle of the desert by getting out and walking toward other people. Why do ordinary visitors doing nothing that appears reckless die inside a national park with paved roads? And why does the instinct to walk out, the same instinct almost anyone would follow, become the very thing that kills them? The trap that looks like a park. When you drive into Death Valley from the East Pass, the welcome sign, and descend toward Furnace Creek, the first thing that strikes you is how ordinary everything seems. There are road signs and distance markers. There is a ranger station and a paved parking lot surrounded by date palms planted more than a century ago to make the oasis feel like home. At Badwater Basin, the salt flats shine white and level beneath the sun. A wooden boardwalk extends across the surface, allowing visitors to walk a few hundred feet and feel as though they have touched the lowest point in North America. Families step onto it wearing flip-flops and pose for selfies. The entire experience is built around one simple idea. You are a visitor, and visitors are taken care of. That is the trap. It is not a concealed pit or a sudden cliff. The trap is comfort. It is the feeling that, because the road has been paved and the signs have been bolted securely into the ground, the desert surrounding them must also have been controlled and secured. It has not. The infrastructure ends at the exact point where the pavement ends. And that pavement is only a thin gray thread stretching across more than 3 million acres of one of the harshest environments on Earth. In July, you could step just 200 yards away from the boardwalk, twist your ankle, and find yourself in genuine danger within an hour. Across most of the park, there is no cell signal, none at all. You can stand on a paved road inside a national park in one of the most connected countries on Earth, raise your phone into the air, and watch it search endlessly for a tower that does not exist. This place gives you the feeling of safety without actually providing safety. And that feeling is what allows every small mistake here to become the last mistake you ever make. To understand why, you first need to understand the heat engine operating beneath everything you see. The heat engine. Death Valley lies in eastern California along the northern edge of the Mojave Desert. In the ordinary sense of the word, it is not really a valley. It is a deep, narrow trench carved into the surface of the earth. At Badwater Basin, the floor of that trench drops to 282 feet below sea level, making it the lowest point on the North American continent. On both sides, mountains rise sharply into the sky. The Panamint Range to the west climbs above 11,000 feet. The Black Mountains form a wall along the eastern side. Within only 16 miles, the terrain rises from the lowest point in North America to Telescope Peak at an elevation of 11,049 feet. The landscape resembles a long sunken bowl with steep walls and almost no vegetation on the floor to soften the sunlight. That shape creates a machine that continually reheats itself. Throughout the day, the sun pounds the dark, exposed ground. The surface then radiates that heat back into the air. Hot air rises, but inside this basin it becomes trapped. It rises slightly, cools slightly, and then sinks back down along the mountain slopes. As it descends, it is compressed. Compressed air becomes hotter through a process known as adiabatic compression. The same mass of air is heated again and again with nowhere to escape. Images captured by NASA's Landsat 8 satellite during the June 2013 heat wave showed that thermal radiation from the valley floor is significantly stronger than in the surrounding regions. The images confirm the mechanism of this enclosed natural furnace. 4 separate mountain ranges also stand between Death Valley and the Pacific Ocean, creating several overlapping rain shadows. Each range removes more moisture from air moving inland until almost nothing remains by the time it reaches the valley. The valley floor receives only about 2 inches of rain each year. In 1929, 1953, and 1989, no measurable rain fell at all. Between 1931 and 1934, Death Valley experienced a record dry period in which only 0.64 inches of rain fell over 40 months. Meanwhile, the amount of water lost through evaporation is equivalent to roughly 150 inches each year. There is no moisture in the soil. There are no clouds to weaken the sunlight. There is nothing to interrupt the heat. The result is a collection of records that no other place would ever want. On July 10, 1913, the weather station at Furnace Creek recorded a temperature of 134 DGF. For more than a century, that figure has been regarded as the highest air temperature ever measured anywhere on the surface of the planet. Some modern climatologists believe the reading may have been inaccurate, perhaps the result of an error made by a single observer during an unusual week of extreme weather. But the disputed record is not necessary to prove the point. In August 20 and again in July 21, Furnace Creek reached 130 DGF. Those readings are widely accepted as the highest temperatures ever reliably recorded on Earth. During an average July, the daily high in Death Valley is around 116 DGF. In July 2018, the average temperature for the entire month, including nighttime readings, reached 108.1 DGF. It became the hottest month ever recorded at the hottest place on Earth, and the night provides almost no relief. Overnight temperatures can remain above 90 DGF. No relief arrives at midnight. In truth, no relief arrives at all. But temperature alone is not what kills people. What kills them is what that temperature does inside the human body, and especially inside the human brain. When physics reverses, the human body is essentially a cooling machine powered by water. When you become hot, you sweat. As that sweat evaporates from your skin, it carries heat away from the body. Under normal conditions, this system works remarkably well. It is the reason a person can run a marathon or stand in a kitchen all day without collapsing. But the entire system depends on one condition. The surrounding air must be cooler than your body. Only then can heat move from the body into the environment. In Death Valley during July, that condition no longer exists. When the air temperature rises above roughly 90 DGF, the direction of heat transfer begins to reverse. The air no longer draws heat away from your body. It begins forcing heat into it. Your skin, your breath, and every exposed surface now absorb energy from the environment instead of releasing it. The only tool you have left is sweat. But in air, this dry sweat evaporates almost the moment it appears. According to the CDC, an adult can lose around 1.5 liters of water every hour through sweating in extreme heat. Research conducted by the United States Committee on Military Nutrition Research found that sweat loss can reach 3 to 4 liters per hour during intense physical activity and high temperatures. A person can lose more than a liter of water in an hour without seeing a single drop on the skin because it disappears before it has time to collect. You drink water to replace it, but you cannot drink quickly enough. The intestines can absorb only around 0.8 to 1.2 liters per hour. Water leaves the body faster than you can put it back. As dehydration becomes severe, the body reduces sweat production because there is no longer enough water available to create it. The moment sweating stops, the final cooling system collapses. Core temperature begins to rise. Normal core temperature is around 98.6 DGF. By the time you feel dizzy, nauseated, and aware of your heart pounding heat, exhaustion has already begun. Heat stroke develops when core temperature rises above 104 DGF. From that point forward, the organs begin cooking from within. The liver, the kidneys, the brain. And the brain is where the true cruelty reveals itself. A study published in Frontiers in Neuroscience in 2024 confirmed that the brain is one of the organs most vulnerable to hyperthermia. Extreme heat disrupts the blood-brain barrier, allowing immune cells to enter brain tissue and trigger inflammation. At the same time, the body reduces blood flow to the brain in an attempt to release heat. The organ that depends most heavily on oxygen begins receiving less of it. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for working memory, impulse control, and judgment, is especially sensitive to heat-related reductions in blood flow. The Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation has reported that losing only 2% of body weight through sweat, something that can happen within 2 hours, is enough to cause a measurable decline in cognitive performance. That matters more than almost any other number in this entire story. One of the first things to disappear before the body collapses and before the seizures begin is judgment. Heat stroke makes you confused. It makes you irritable, then disoriented, and eventually completely certain of things that are not true. It does not simply knock you down and leave you lying there fully aware that you are dying. It takes control of the mind and leads you toward a decision. You leave the car, you begin walking, you move towards something on the horizon completely convinced that it is the correct thing to do. The desert does not attack the body alone. First, it enters the mind and removes the one ability that might save your life, the ability to recognize that you are in danger. The case of Peter Hayes Rubino shows how this unfolds in the real world. In August 24, with temperatures in Death Valley reaching 190 GF, witnesses said they saw Rubino staggering toward his vehicle. When someone offered to help, he refused. His answers made no sense. He then drove over a drop of about 20 feet at the edge of a parking area. The vehicle rolled over and the airbags deployed. A passerby climbed down and pulled him from the wreck. Emergency personnel from the National Park Service received the 911 call at 3:50 in the afternoon and arrived at 4:10. Witnesses said Rubino was still breathing until shortly before the Rangers reached him. He was pronounced dead at 4:42. The crash itself was survivable. What killed him was the heat. But before the heat killed his body, it had already taken away his ability to make a meaningful decision. His brain had been overtaken before his body finally collapsed. And that pattern appears in almost every death in Death Valley. Ordinary ways to die. In July 23, a 65-year-old man was found dead inside his vehicle in Death Valley. The air conditioning had failed. He never made it out of the car. A vehicle in this landscape is two things at once. It is the best shelter available, a metal box with air conditioning, shade, and drinking water. But it is also a machine being forced to operate at full capacity in temperatures it was never designed to endure. Engines overheat. Ordinary tires can burst on pavement hot enough to soften rubber. Air conditioning compressors fail. And the moment the vehicle stops working, the box that kept you alive becomes an oven beneath the sun. Interior temperatures can rise above 150 degrees within minutes. That 65-year-old man died because one mechanical component failed on exactly the wrong afternoon. If a car is dangerous here, then a motorcycle is close to suicidal. On July 6, 24, 6 motorcyclists from Germany entered the valley near Badwater Basin. The temperature that afternoon reached 128 degrees, setting a new record for that date. On a motorcycle, there is no air conditioning, there is no shade. The rider sits above a hot engine while wearing heavy protective clothing and a helmet. The same equipment designed to protect the body during a crash also traps heat against the skin. And movement offers no relief. When the air is hotter than the human body, when rushing past at 60 miles per hour does not cool you, it becomes air from a furnace. It heats the body even faster. All 6 riders collapsed from heat-related illness. Jürgen Fink, 61, died at the scene. The others were found scattered across the desert in different stages of physical collapse. The rescue operation then encountered the cruelest detail of the valley. The helicopter could not fly. According to an official statement from the National Park Service, emergency medical helicopters generally cannot operate safely when temperatures rise above 120 degrees. At that level of heat, the air becomes thinner. Thin air does not provide enough lift for the rotor blades. The aircraft that should have been the lifeline, the machine capable of crossing 60 miles of desert within minutes and carrying victims to a hospital, was held on the ground by the same heat that was killing them. The survivors had to be transported by ground ambulance for more than 60 miles to the nearest hospital. The heat does not merely injure you, it cuts the very rope you expected would pull you out. But the next case is the most frightening of all because the victim was careful, experienced, and prepared. Steve Curry was 71 years old and lived in the Sunland neighborhood of Los Angeles. He had been a serious hiker throughout his life. On July 18, 23, he went hiking in Death Valley. The temperature that afternoon reached 121 degrees a few hours before his death. A reporter and photographer from the Los Angeles Times encountered him on a trail near Zabriskie Point. He was crouched inside the narrow patch of shade cast by a metal sign, his body covered in sunscreen. He was sheltering beneath an information sign because for miles around, nothing else was tall enough to block the sun. The reporter asked why he was hiking in heat like this. Curry replied, "Why not?" He said he was accustomed to hot weather. He refused every offer of assistance. Later that afternoon, after returning to the Golden Canyon trailhead, Steve Curry collapsed outside a restroom and died. Inside Golden Canyon, where rock walls absorb sunlight and radiate heat back into the air, the temperature was almost certainly higher than 121 degrees. When other hikers found him and called for help, the Rangers arrived quickly, but once again the medical helicopter could not fly. An experienced man died at the beginning of a marked trail, only a short walk from his own vehicle inside a national park. And the machine that might have saved him remained on the ground because the sky was too hot to keep it in the air. That is why every official summer warning sign in the park gives the same command. Do not hike after 10 in the morning. Not be careful. Not bring water. Do not do it. 3 cases. 3 completely different levels of preparation. The same ending. In the first case, a mechanical failure. In the second, a vehicle completely unsuited to the environment. In the third, nothing more than confidence. The margin of error required to die here is almost impossibly small, and every one of these cases shares the same feature, something that becomes clearest in the story toward which everything has been leading. The German family in July '96, a family from Dresden, Germany, traveled to the American West for the kind of road trip people dream about for years. There were 4 of them. Egbert Rimkus was 34, an architect who had recently endured a difficult divorce and hoped the journey would help unite a new family. His girlfriend was Cornelia Meyer, 27, known to everyone as Connie. With them were Egbert's 11-year-old son Georg and Connie's 4-year-old son Max. They flew into Los Angeles, rented a Plymouth Voyager minivan, and spent the first part of the journey much like any other visitors. They explored the coast, admired the lights of Las Vegas, and won a little money at the slot machines. On July 22, they checked out of their Las Vegas hotel and drove into Death Valley. They stopped at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. Receipts and official records show that someone in the group purchased 2 German-language guidebooks to the park. They visited the popular attractions. Then they did the one thing the entire park system was designed to discourage. They left the paved road. They pointed the minivan toward the remote, empty western side of the valley, a region most visitors never see. They were searching for a shortcut through the mountains toward Yosemite. The route they chose climbed through a maze of dirt tracks toward Mengel Pass, rough terrain intended for 4-wheel drive vehicles, the kind of road capable of destroying an unsuitable car. Their Voyager was only a 2-wheel drive passenger van. Tom Mahood, the man who would later find them, believed the map in the guidebook purchased at the visitor center may have misled the family. It showed the route as passable without clearly distinguishing between an ordinary road and a trail intended for off-road vehicles. At Warm Springs Mine, an abandoned site deep in the desert, Cornelia signed the visitor log. Her note, written in German, said they intended to cross the pass. It was one of the last confirmed traces of the family alive. Somewhere beyond that point, among the broken rocks of Anvil Spring Canyon, 3 of the vehicle's 4 tires went flat. They continued driving on the wheel rims for more than 2 miles before the minivan finally stopped deep inside a region where no one had any reason to search. This was the moment on which the entire story turned. They were stranded far from the paved road in the middle of July inside Death Valley. 2 adults, 2 children, very little water, temperatures near 120 degrees. They left the vehicle, and they began to walk. The minivan was not discovered until October 96, 3 months after the family disappeared, when a ranger spotted it from a helicopter during a routine patrol. When search teams reached the vehicle, the family's belongings were still inside, but there was no trace of the 4 people. Around 250 personnel, supported by helicopters and trained search crews, combed the surrounding area. They found only a beer bottle beneath a bush and a patch of ground that appeared to have been cleared by someone seeking shade. That was all. After 4 days, the operation ended. The desert had swallowed the family, and for 13 years it kept them hidden. The internet filled the silence with theories. Some claimed the family had staged their disappearance to begin a new life. Others believed they had been murdered. A few suspected they had discovered a military secret near the China Lake Naval Weapons Facility and had been deliberately eliminated. None of those theories was true. The truth was far simpler and far more terrible. Tom Mahood was a retired engineer living in Orange, California, and a search and rescue volunteer with the Riverside Mountain Rescue Unit. He began investigating the case in 2008. He reviewed records from the Inyo County Sheriff's Office and worked with people who understood the terrain. Then he did something the official search had not done. He sat down and tried to think like a desperate father whose body was overheating, who had 2 children beside him and who had run out of water. He reconstructed the direction they might have taken. Not the direction that made the most logical sense, but the direction a frightened and confused person might actually choose. His theory was that the family had seen or had known about the China Lake military installation to the south. They walked toward it because they believed that where there were soldiers, there would be help. In November 2009, Mahood and his partner Les Walker descended into a remote drainage near Goler Wash, roughly 8 to 9 miles south of the abandoned minivan. They're scattered among the rocks. They found human remains, Cornelia Meyer's faded daily planner, identification documents, and credit cards. DNA testing conducted through the Inyo County Coroner's Office confirmed that some of the bones belonged to Egbert. The sole of a child's shoe was found nearby, but there was not enough DNA to determine who had worn it. The remains of the 2 children were never officially recovered. After 13 years, they had most likely been scattered by flash floods and wild animals. The remains were found about 8 miles from the minivan and only a few miles from the boundary fence of the China Lake Naval Base. That final detail is the key. Investigators believe the family walked toward the military facility because they thought it represented safety. They moved through temperatures near 120 degrees. They carried 2 young children across some of the most fractured and unforgiving terrain in North America, heading toward a fence that, even if they had reached it, was not staffed in the way they imagined. The fact that they covered 8 miles in that heat with so little water is almost impossible to comprehend. It means they fought for a very long time. Investigators believe the children died first. 4-year-old Max and 11-year-old Georg could not have endured the conditions as long as the adults. The evidence suggests that the parents carried them, remained beside them, and continued moving for as long as their bodies allowed. Egbert's remains were found on higher ground than the others. Searchers interpreted this as the final trace of a failing attempt to climb high enough to see a road alight or anything that might lead them out. He died searching for an escape that had never existed. All 4 died in a landscape where every direction revealed nothing but more desert. The evidence from those who survived. Had the family done only one thing differently remained beside the minivan, they would very likely have survived. The vehicle was a large metal object far easier to detect from the air than a human body. It provided shade. It remained in a fixed and identifiable location, and eventually it was found, but the family was no longer beside it. This is not speculation. It is a lesson the desert has repeated many times. In 2005, a man whose vehicle broke down in the same desert remained where he was. He rationed his water and survived for 6 days before rescuers found him. In 2021, another stranded traveler survived for 3 days by staying with his truck. The same desert, the same heat, the same isolation, a different decision, and that is the answer. People cannot walk out of Death Valley because by the time they decide to begin walking, the environment has already taken away the part of the mind capable of making a better choice. The vehicle that failed you is still your best chance of survival. The instinct to walk toward help is the instinct that may kill you because the heat has convinced an injured brain that the distance can still be crossed. It cannot. The German family were not foolish tourists. Steve Curry was not careless. Jürgen Fink was not recklessly seeking danger. They were ordinary people whose minds were quietly turned against them by an environment that offers no warning and grants no second chance. Death Valley is one of the most beautiful places in America. Salt flats glowing at dawn, hills painted in layers of color, dunes turning gold beneath the final light of evening. Most of the more than 1 million people who visit each year drive and take photographs, drink water, remain close to their vehicles, and leave with nothing more serious than sunburn. But the distance between a remarkable day and a fatal one can be no greater than a single bad decision. And the heat is always standing beside you, gently pushing you toward it. The desert does not hate anyone. It feels nothing for the people who die within it, and it feels nothing for those who survive. That indifference in a place this hot is the deadliest force of all. It will allow you to walk as far as you choose. It simply will not allow you to return.